What's up, everyone? It's Matt Martin with Outdoor Designs. I want to apologize first for on this video. My voice is going to sound terrible. We've had a lot of wildfires in the area, and our air quality right now on the alert scale has been between orange and red for the last couple of weeks due to the drought we've been in, and so my voice is right about gone. But I keep getting asked a lot of questions about fertilizers and the different types of fertilizers. What fertilizers should I be using? And so more importantly than just pointing out, hey, you need to go down with the 25-4-11. I think it's important to understand what you're putting down and why you're putting it down and how the grass is going to be able to utilize each of those nutrients. So today, mainly, I want to start with nitrogen, our nitrogen sources, control release nitrogen sources, and really just break that down into the science behind nitrogen. So here we go. Alright, everyone, so to start off here, let's start by talking about fertilizer analysis. That way we can understand where we get our nitrogen from. So, when you're applying just a straight nitrogen app, what you're usually going to be applying is like a 46-0-0. And what these three numbers mean right here, this relates to the nitrogen content in the bag, in the actual bag you have. So if you have a 50-pound bag, then you've got 46% of that 50-pound bag as actual nitrogen. So this is important because when most people ask you, how much nitrogen are you putting down? You can say, well, I put down a bag of fertilizer, but that doesn't tell you anything. What you need to know is how much actual nitrogen you're putting down, say per 1,000 square feet. So we'll go ahead and do the math on this. If we're putting down 50 pounds of 46-0-0, we're putting down approximately 25 pounds of N. So 46, just for ease of math, where this is the percent nitrogen per bag, we'll say, we'll call this 50 just for easy math. 46% of 50 pounds, approximately 25 pounds of N. So if you're putting, 25 pounds of N down, you want to cover, approximately 25,000 square feet. So if you've got a 25,000 square foot yard and you put down a 50-pound bag of 46-0-0, you are putting down 1 pound of actual N per 1,000 square feet. Anyway, that's a quick way to do math, and we'll do it this way too. So if you're putting down a 25-0-0 and you put it down at 4 pounds per 1,000 square feet, at 25% here, you're putting down 1 pound of actual N per 1,000 square feet. So you're putting down 4 pounds per 1,000 square feet of a 25% nitrogen, which comes out to 1 pound of actual N per 1,000 square feet. 4 pounds of product, 1 pound of N. Okay, so now let's get into the different types of nitrogen that we're going to encounter. So first and foremost, the most popular, probably the cheapest one, and that's the reason why everybody goes to it, is going to be urea. Urea is our cheapest nitrogen by far, and it's a pretty high percentage nitrogen. This comes in at a 46-0-0. And if you've ever seen a bag of urea, it is just a white prill. Usually it comes in pretty small particle size. It's easy to spread. It's easy to dump into your tank and dissolve it in the water so you can make a foliar application. So we're going to talk about urea. How does urea work? So urea is not pure nitrogen, obviously. That's why it's only 46% nitrogen. So the way urea works, when it's applied, to the soil surface, you have urea that will interact with water, and what happens that exists in the soil will be urea. So as it dissolves the urea and it works its way, here's your turf grass plant, and it works its way. You got a prill here, you got water, it works its way into the soil. It's going to meet urease. And this urease will catalyze your urea into two different products. It will react and turn into NH3, which is ammonia, and carbon dioxide, CO2. So, why is this important? Okay, so urea, it has to go through a conversion before it's in a usable nitrogen form by the turf grass. So urea has to meet water. It's going to interact with the urease already in the soil, and then it's going to convert to ammonia. The problem with NH3 is a gas. Ammonia is a gas, and that is going to lead to a little bit of potential. So we'll look at this. So we've got our soil surface, we've got our grass, we've got our fertilizer that has just converted into NH3 and CO2. As we all know, plants love CO2. That's how they give us oxygen and photosynthesis. And so we've got NH3 and CO2. But then NH3 is a gas. So what can happen is the NH3 will begin to volatilize, meaning the gas will escape its target zone, where we want it to be taken in by the roots. We want the roots of the turf grass to absorb it, but we're going to lose some of it to gas. So how do you prevent this volatilization? Because that's going to be the most important part. You can just let it go and say, hey, look, if I put down 1 pound of N per 1,000 square feet from urea, I can expect to lose, once it's watered in, I'm probably going to lose 25%. And how much you end up losing is based a little bit off soil pH. The higher the pH, usually the quicker the urea is going to convert into NH3, so typically you'll lose a little bit more of it because of that fast conversion. Whereas lower pH soils, more acidic soils, you're going to get like a 4-day turnaround for it to convert into usable nitrogen, and you won't lose as much. But again, we're talking about very minute amounts. It's not like having a super acidic soil is going to be crazy beneficial for the length of residual nitrogen in your soil. So anyway, urea, not a perfect fertilizer by itself. You're going to lose some to volatilization, and there's just not really anything you can do about it, unless there's the first thing. So there are two products on the market called U-Flex. And then there's one called U-Max. And so what these are urease inhibitors. So what the U-Flex and the U-Max are going to do is slow down this conversion here from the urea turning into the ammonia gas and the CO2. So by slowing that process down, there's going to be lower amounts of actual nitrogen available to the root system at one time. So if you apply just a straight urea with no urease inhibitor, all of this is going to convert into NH3 and CO2 at one time. Whereas if you apply a urease inhibitor, you are only going to get a percentage of your urea converting into NH3 and CO2 at a time. So it'll much more slowly become available to the plant. It's not going to happen all at once. Some people get confused and think Uflex and Umax are actually slow release fertilizers, control release. They're not. They just control the actual conversion of urea into NH3. They don't actually control the amount of the release of the actual fertilizer. They just can control the chemical reaction that takes place. So anyway, so now we've got urea, we've got Uflex and Umax, the urease inhibitors that slow the chemical reaction of urea to become plant available NH3. And again, these are super popular. Urea on itself is fairly cheap. The Uflex and the Umax, if you get it already blended together, it's going to add a pretty penny to the cost of your urea. You can buy urease inhibitors like Uflex and Umax urease inhibitors. One from Helena Chemical is going to be called Infix, which is the same urease inhibitor as Umax. And let me explain to you. Umax is typically going to slow the release of urea. Is going to slow the reaction of urea to NH3 by about 25% more than your Uflex. So Uflex, typically they'll say, you're getting, like 6 weeks of color out of your Uflex. Whereas with the Umax, sometimes they'll say eight weeks. Some people will say 10 weeks of color out of it. So your mileage may vary. I have used a lot of Infix. I would melt my urea down into my tank and then also add my Infix to my tank and apply it as a foliar fertilizer. And I don't know if I got 8 weeks of color, but I sure as hell got a minimum of 6 weeks of color. And the color was great. The color was fantastic. So I'm a big fan of these urease inhibitors. If I sprayed more liquids, I would use them a lot more. But now that the Permagreen's into the equation, I don't spray a lot of liquids. So we've got urea. We've got urease inhibitors. Let's move on to what we have next. So probably our most popular forms of slow release fertilizers, of slow release urea, are going to be Polycoat and Polycoat Sulfur Coat. So we got Polycoat, Sulfur Coat. Polycoat is also going to be branded XCU. Those are going to be like from, I think Agrium is the one who started the whole XCU thing. Poly Plus is going to be like Site 1, Lesco, their brand of Polycoat. And then we've also got Harrells has a Polycoat as well. I'm trying to remember what theirs is called. Polyon. Theirs is called Polyon. So polymer coated fertilizers do a good job of controlling the release of the urea prill. As drawn here, we've got our urea prill, that's designated by N, and then we've actually got our polymer coating that goes around the outside. This can come in 3 different forms. It can be treated with a thermoresin, which is basically like a plastic coating that goes around the urea prill. It can also be basically a chemical reaction zone where they spray 2 products onto the prill of the urea, and it'll form a thin membrane around it, and it can be applied at different levels of thicknesses to control the release. You know, give you a 45-day duration or an 80-day duration. And then there's also one like Osmocote, where it's layers of fatty acid salt around the actual prill of fertilizer, and then they coat that in a paraffin wax. So you know, those are all different forms of polymer coated fertilizer. The big drawback to polymer coated fertilizer is going to be its temperature sensitivity. The higher the temp, the higher the release. So this can get tricky if you're applying it in spring and you know you're trying to get a solid 6-8 weeks of release out of this fertilizer, and then all of a sudden we get temperatures spike up to 85 degrees. Then that fertilizer may release a whole lot faster than you anticipated, and I've seen many guys burn up yards by doing that. So that's just one thing to keep in mind when you're working with Polyco. The higher the temperature gets, the faster it's going to release. The higher the temperature, the more it's going to allow water into the prill to actually reach the urea, and the more water that reaches that urea, the more it's going to dissolve, the faster it's going to work out of that polymer coating and into the soil. And then from Polycoat we have Polycoat Sulfur Coat, and so this is commonly referred to as PCSCU, Polymer Coat Sulfur Coated Urea. And this is the one I like to use, and the reason being is it's kind of double duty here. So we'll have our urea prill designated in, and then we will have a sulfur coating on it. This will be sulfur. And then on top of that sulfur, you will also have a polymer coat. And so basically this is double. This is going to be double duty as far as providing insurance to the release. It works the same way. As you get H2O moving into the prill, it will work through this. It'll work through the imperfections in the sulfur, and then reach your urea prill, and then it will work back out through the perfections in the sulfur, and then back through the polymer coating into the soil to undergo the conversion of coming in contact with urease to become NH3 and CO2. So the one advantage to PCSCU over a true polycoat is going to be PCSCU is not as temperature sensitive as polycoat. So no matter how hot it gets outside, this is going to be a little bit more of a predictable reaction than our true polycoat is. Again, we're not talking about just giant differences here, but it can be just a bit more predictable. When it's me and I'm using either a polycoat or a PCSCU, I'm going to go PCSCU almost every time. Again, I buy a lot of my fertilizers from Harrells, and Harrells offers the PCSCU, and that's one of the reasons I like to buy from them. Unless I'm buying organics, then I like to go with Harrells. So anyway, those are going to be our control forms of granular urea. We got our polycoats and we got our polycoat sulfur coat. Let me explain to you one of the big drawbacks of this, the release is only going to be as good as the integrity of the coating on the prill. So what does that mean? If this prill gets damaged, smashed, hit by a lawnmower, whatever, if there's a fracture that takes place in here, then the control release rate of this of this fertilizer has been altered. It is not going to release at the way it's designed to be released. So that's just one thing to keep in mind. If this prill gets damaged, it doesn't happen a lot, but I mean, if you apply a granular product on top of granular PCSU or Polyco product on top of well-groomed, zoysia or Bermuda grass, where after you finish fertilizing it, you can see it sitting there at the top, and then right as you finish doing it, they come in with their mowers and mow it. Well, what was a bunch of control release nitrogen being put down is no longer going to be control release. That's pretty much all going to be quick release at that point, because that mower will damage the majority of those prills. So that's just one thing to keep in mind. If you're fertilizing a fescue yard and you're putting it down at 5 pounds per thousand, chances are it's not going to sit there at that 3-inch, 4-inch mark for it to be hit by a mower. So anyway, PCSU, PCU, those are those two forms. So let's move into other forms of urea real quick. And I'm just going to use the bottom of this page because there's only a couple of more that I think are worth talking about. And there may be some out there that I'm just not familiar with, and if you know any of those, feel free to bring it up to me, because I'm always open to learn more. And again, today I'm only talking about urea. We're going to talk about ammonium sulfate, ammonium nitrate at a later time. So today is strictly going to be urea.